Government should be working to make people's lives easier, not standing in the way of things that people want to do, not standing in the way of people's personal decisions, but trying to make things easier for people. And what concerns me is that it appears like every decision that is coming from this administration is designed to help a very specific group of people, and that we are just ignoring everybody else, the bottom half. The people who need our help, they have to be at the forefront. And they're not always the folks that write the big checks, but they're the folks that need the most help and that the government should be helping the most. That's why I'm running. Those are the people I want to speak for. Those are the people who need the help right now.
Educate, inform, inspire. The Dan Parsons Show, a podcast that lifts up instead of tearing down.
Hey, welcome to the Dan Parsons Show. I'm your host, Dan Parsons. Hey, coming up on today's show, the race for the hottest congressional seat in America is heating up. I'll interview Denise Powell, candidate for the Democratic nomination for Congress in Omaha's Blue Dot, the 2nd District. But before I introduce Denise, I think it's about time for a Go Fact Yourself Fact of the Week. And today's topic, the Epstein Files.
You know, I kind of feel like Dan Parsons. Dan Parsons lost his job on the conservative talk radio show in Lincoln for using the F word. You know what the F word is? Facts.
President Trump is using every trick in his massive book of tricks to divert attention away from members of his own political party who are clamoring for the release of the files. In fact, as I think most of you know, a significant block of voters who helped get him elected both in 2016 and 2024, were those who believed he was going to once and for all expose the so-called deep state, including the sinister cabal of sex traffickers led by Jeffrey Epstein. And now, President Trump dismisses the Epstein case as, quote, a hoax, a scam, and bullshit, and even asked a room of reporters recently why anyone is still talking about a sex offender nobody cares about. Well, how much effort will the president use to try and divert our attention away from this issue, one that his own supporters firmly believe? Well, let's look at this clip from the president just yesterday in the White House. Producer Chase, roll the tape.
Mr. President, do you support the Justice Department seeking a new interview with Ghislaine Maxwell? And did you urge the Attorney General to see her?
I don't know anything about it. They're going to what? Meet her?
Your Deputy Attorney General has reached out to Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney asking for a new interview.
Yeah, I don't know about it, but I think it's something that sounds appropriate to do, yeah.
Do you have any concern that your Deputy Attorney General, as your former attorney, would be conducting the interview, given...
No, I have no concern. He's a very talented person. He's very smart. I didn't know that they were going to do it. I don't really follow that too much. It's sort of a witch hunt, just a continuation of the witch hunt. The witch hunt that you should be talking about is they caught President Obama absolutely cold, Tulsi Gabbard. What they did to this country in 2016, starting in 2016, but going up to 2020 in the election. They tried to rig the election, and they got caught. And there should be very severe consequences for that. You know, when we caught Hillary Clinton, I said, you know what? Let's not go too far here. It's the ex-wife of a president, and I thought it was sort of terrible. And I let her off the hook, and I'm very happy I did. But it's time to start, after what they did to me, and whether it's right or wrong, it's time to go after people. Obama's been caught directly. So people say, oh, a group. It's not a group. It's Obama. His orders are on the paper. The papers are signed. The papers came right out of their office. They sent everything to be highly classified. Well, the highly classified's been released. And what they did in 2016 and in 2020 is very criminal. It's criminal at the highest level. So that's really the things you should be talking about. I know nothing about the other, but I think it's appropriate that they do go.
May I ask you about that, Mr. President? Yeah. Tulsi Gabbard has submitted a criminal referral to the Department of Justice. From your perspective, who should the DOJ target as part of their investigation? What specific figures in the Obama administration?
Well, based on what I read, and I read pretty much what you read, it would be President Obama. He started it. And Biden was there with him, and Comey was there, and Clapper. The whole group was there. Brennan, they were all there in a room. Right here, this was the room. This is much more beautiful than it was then, but that's okay. I have nice pictures up. They came out of the vaults. They were in there for 100 years. This is much more beautiful. We have the Declaration of Independence now in the room, which wasn't here. I guess people didn't feel too good about putting it here, but I do. But you know what? If you look at those papers, they have them stone cold, and it was President Obama. It wasn't lots of people all over the place. It was them too. But the leader of the gang was President Obama, Barack Hussein Obama. Have you heard of him?
Barack Hussein Obama. Have you heard of him? Oh my gosh. That was just bizarre. I mean, there's been a lot of bizarre news briefings in this room, this beautiful room. But that kind of takes it to another level. So basically, the current president of the United States is accusing the president before him of treason. And so are we just that's okay? And again, this is all an effort to divert our attention away from the issue that he desperately does not want to talk about. The most hated person among Trump's base is former President Obama. And he just accused him of being guilty of treason. He said, right or wrong, it's time to go after people. In addition to that spectacle in the White House just yesterday, Speaker Mike Johnson said he would shut down the House early for its summer recess to head off Democrat demands for votes on calling for the release of files into Jeffrey Epstein, in order to avoid what the speaker called political games. So this stuff matters. Who we elect to Congress matters. So we'll keep following and reporting on this issue. In the meantime, Go Fact Yourself t-shirts are available from our friends at Raygun, the greatest store in the universe, in Omaha, Lincoln, or online. Partial proceeds support local journalism right here in Nebraska and our friends at Flatwater Free Press. Okay, here's my interview with Denise Powell. Enjoy. Hey, it is my pleasure to introduce Denise Powell, candidate for the Democratic nomination for Congress, Nebraska's 2nd District. Denise, welcome to the Dan Parsons Show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be on.
Well, it's a delight to have you, Denise. We met for the first time just recently, and
Yes.
of course, I've been reading about your candidacy, and I am covering this race extensively. And boy, howdy, we got a lot of interest in this.
Woo! What a ride it's been so far.
And so, anyway, thank you for making time. I know this is a busy time as you get your campaign kicked off. But let's just start with the easy stuff.
Okay.
Tell our audience a little bit about your background. And I guess the second part of that question, why do you want to serve in Congress?
All good questions. Okay, first of all, my background here, I was a corporate communications gal. So worked for a lot of big companies for a long time, representing all sorts of big brands and big corporations. And then I had a little bit of a change of scenery where I took the position of communications director with the Nebraska Loves Public Schools campaign.
Yeah.
If you remember seeing those I Heart Public Schools t-shirts all over town, that was us. And we would go around the state telling stories about interesting programs and innovative educators, cool things happening at public schools all around the state. And that was really my intro to politics because it gave me an appreciation for how awesome our public schools are and the incredible things that are happening at public schools around the state. but also really clearly showed the gaps that our public schools are trying to solve for. And, things like food insecurity and kids who are bouncing around on friends' couches all night and don't really have a stable place to live, mental health, and a lot of other issues that communities are dealing with, and schools often become that first line of defense. And that led me to exploring who the gap fillers were. And I started, working with a lot of different nonprofits and organizations in town, all different boards of organizations that were trying to fill those gaps one way or another. Then Donald Trump was elected to public office the first time. And perhaps you remember 2016 and how we all felt that day thinking, oh my God, what has happened? And I, like a lot of other people, I was going to every rally and I was, signing petitions and I was writing letters to my elected officials and just feeling like I was screaming into the void, and knew that that wasn't going to be sustainable. So I founded an organization called Women Who Run Nebraska.
Love the name, by the way.
Love the name. And, we got a lot of runners in the early days, people who would join because they thought it was a running club. But what it really was is an organization that recruits and trains and supports and builds a community around women who wanted to run for office across the state. Because the idea was, if we could get enough smart, caring, compassionate women to run for just about every seat on the ballot, perhaps it would help start solving for a lot of the things that were worrying me personally. And that is how I sort of got my start in Nebraska politics. And for the last 8 years, I have been helping recruit and train and support, at this point, hundreds of women all up and down the ballot, all over the state. And through that organization, have done some work on the policy side, trying to change state policies to make it easier for people to be able to run for office in the first place. Got to work on lots of different ballot measures and travel the whole state talking to voters about issues that were important to them, their public schools and reproductive health care and paid sick leave. And that has been such a formative experience, because over the years, I have knocked on literally thousands of doors all over this state. People who I agree with on a lot of issues, and people who are on the opposite side of a lot of issues from me. Yep. And you have to be able to do that. And you have to be able to have conversations with folks and be willing to listen and learn and share your perspectives. And what that has taught me is that most Nebraskans are kind of in the center. And if you can have those one-on-one conversations, there are so many shared values that people in this state hold. We actually have a lot more in common than we don't.
Absolutely.
And part of that is what motivated me to run for this seat. So back in December, my friend Tony Vargas met me for coffee, and he said, hey, I think you might want to give this a run. And my initial response was, okay, that is nuts. Like, absolutely not. That sounds crazy. And then we talked about it for a long time, and I talked about it with my family, and I talked about it with folks in the community. And what I came to the realization that I think there's a space for the voice of kind of your average working mom who's savvy enough about politics, but who's not a politician, and who's just somebody who's fired up. And I'm angry, and I'm sad, and I'm scared for our country. And I care deeply about this state and these people. And I just want to show up. I just want the chance to give back to this state what this state has given to me. And what an honor it would be to represent District 2 in Congress.
That's a great story, Denise, because I think most of us want to do something, whether you're someone like you that have been involved in politics, for a good portion of your life, and now looking to serve. And I think all of us feel like we need to do something. And but most of us don't decide to run for Congress because it will be, not only will this be, it'll be one of the most expensive House races in America, certainly one of the most watched House races in America, one of the most competitive House races in America. And so, and as we mentioned in the pregame, there's a lot of folks who see this opportunity after Congressman Bacon announced his retirement. It's not often a congressional seat in Nebraska comes open. And so here we go. So
Here we go.
yeah.
Here we
What's been the most challenging aspect of your campaign in the short few weeks you've been running so far?
Trying to be everywhere at once.
Yeah.
And that's a me thing because I'm a lifelong learner. And so I love talking to people. I love meeting people. I love going to different places. And quite frankly, there just is never enough time to meet with, talk to, visit all the places that you want to visit. It's nice that I got into this race early and I was one of the first candidates in the race. So I've had a little bit more time. But I'm so hungry to connect with everybody that I can connect with in this district. And this district is huge and really diverse and very sprawling. And so that's been the greatest challenge, is not having a teleporter so that I can just pop around different places and talk to everybody who I want to talk to.
Yeah. Well, you do have a good head start. And this race, even though it's heating up, the primaries, not till next May, the general not till next November. So plenty of time to do all those to-dos on your list, Denise.
Oh, yeah. Got nothing but time.
Well, let's start with this. I've become, I watch the headlines. That's my job. That's what I do since I was a little kid. And the headlines that are dominating the news right now is about Jeffrey Epstein, this disgraced pedophile that was convicted by U.S. courts and then died in custody some time back. And even though those acts happened under when President Trump served the first time, it seems like he's trying to ignore the activities, even though he promised to a lot of his base that he was going to be the person that uncovered all of these dirty deeds. And so from a congressional perspective, Speaker Mike Johnson, we're recording this on whatever day this is. Today is Tuesday. Everyone will see this tomorrow on Wednesday. So just today, Speaker Mike Johnson said that he would shut down the House early for its summer recess to head off Democratic demands for votes, calling for the release of files from the investigation into Jeffrey Epstein. In order to avoid what the speaker called political games. Speaker Johnson said the House would adjourn until September after they finish votes scheduled for tomorrow night, Wednesday night. And that announcement came after the House Oversight Committee voted to subpoena Ghislaine Maxwell, the longtime partner of Mr. Epstein, for a deposition. So again, from a congressional perspective, are they doing their job, or are they sidelining once again their responsibility to be the check on the executive branch? Anyway, your thoughts?
I think they're absolutely, your words are perfect, sidelining their responsibility to be the check. And I talk to a lot of people who feel very frustrated and feel like their elected officials are not listening to them, like their elected officials are not representing the will of the people. And they are just sort of aligning themselves with the president, even when it's clear that they themselves have questions about an issue, a bill, an idea. And I think this is just one more example of that. And I think that's why we have folks who are checking out of politics.
Yeah.
I talk to people all the time who tell me that they've turned off their news alerts on their phone because they just can't take it anymore. And I think we do a huge disservice when we don't listen to people and listen to the things that they are asking for. And they're asking for transparency from their government in this moment, and their government is not giving them that. So it's problematic on multiple levels, not the least of which is the fact that this is once again an example of how the government is choosing to ignore the voice of the people. And I think it's really interesting to see the breadth of folks who are upset about this.
Yes.
Transparency from your government is not a partisan issue. It's just not. And I'm hoping that also helps wake some folks up about the fact that this is not a government that has the best interests of the people at heart. And they keep proving that time and time again. And it is the role of Congress to be that check, and they're not being that check right now. And that's why this House race is so important. That's why it is so critical to flip the House. It's not that we're expecting big monumental change on day one, but there has to be, it's what we learned about in 5th grade civics class, right? The idea of checks and balance, and it's just gone out the window.
Yeah.
So there has to be that stopgap, and it has to start with the House. And that's part of what makes 2026 so dang critical, and this seat in particular so dang critical.
Yeah, well put. Let's move on to the big, beautiful bill, the so-called signature piece of President Trump's first 6 months in office, supported again by Republicans. The entire 5-person congressional delegation from Nebraska voted for it. Here's what the Nebraska Hospital Association said after its passage and the president's signature. They said it would result in nearly 80,000 Nebraskans losing health coverage and a cut of $3.6 billion in funding to Nebraska hospitals over the next 10 years. Jeremy Norquist, president of the Nebraska Hospital Association, said, quote, "These changes will impose unprecedented cuts that threaten access to care, essential services, and the economic stability of hospitals across our region." So I guess maybe the obvious question first, would you have voted for that bill? And what can be done in the next Congress to claw back some of that?
I would absolutely not have voted for this bill. And also, I think the worst part of the story is that that's what they said after the fact, but they said something similar before the vote. And our representatives chose to ignore them. And again, the NHA is not a partisan organization.
Right.
And they're critical, the hospitals in the state are critical economic drivers, aside from the fact that people need them to survive and be healthy. And they were sounding the alarm long before that bill passed. And our representatives chose to ignore that. And that's really, really problematic. And I think what folks need to keep in mind, because I think there are a lot of people who maybe think, I don't get my healthcare through Medicaid, so this really doesn't impact me. I'm not one of those 80,000 people. This isn't going to impact me. But I think we need to keep in mind that when folks who are uninsured or underinsured have to use emergency services to access their healthcare, somebody has to foot the bill. And that ends up being people whose insurance premiums go up. Somebody has to foot the bill. This is not just going away. And I think that part of the solution, number one, it's looking at other creative solutions to solve our healthcare crisis in this country and in this state, because it's not just Medicaid. I talk to people all the time of all socioeconomic levels who want to talk to me about healthcare. But we know that this Medicaid conversation is going to hurt a lot of people and is going to add burdens to individuals and families who cannot take one more burden. But I think aside from that, we live in a country where most people are one healthcare emergency away from bankruptcy.
Yep.
That's real. I got a prescription from my doctor the other day. I have great private health insurance through my husband's job, and it was going to be $3,000 a month. Now, luckily, I don't need that to survive, but I know that there are people out there who are cutting their pills in half, who are skipping medications that they could benefit from because they can't afford it. And I think if we're not willing to do some real deep digging into how we solve these issues, if we're not, going to look at expanding the role of Medicare, negotiate prescription drug prices, if we're not willing to do the real work, we're just going to keep chipping away at a system that is already really, really fragile. I'm really worried about what that means here for folks. And I don't know that all Nebraskans have fully digested just how serious this is going to be for us here. We already had a hospital closure the day after the bill passed.
Yes.
And it's expected anywhere from 6 to 12 more, depending on who you ask, all across the state. Where do those folks go now to access their health care? And there are communities in this state that already have a healthcare desert. There are communities all over the state that don't have an OBGYN. I mean, already our rural healthcare system is really, really fragile. And that's not good for anybody. So this is one of those moments where I think we really need to take a serious look as a country of how we're going to fix this issue. And part of it, I think, is pumping the brakes on some of these cuts to Medicaid so that we're not harming, we're doing as little harm as we can to the folks who really, really need this healthcare. But again, also thinking about what else do we need to do to make healthcare more accessible for folks?
Yeah. Let's shift to foreign policy. When I had Congressman Bacon on the show recently, we talked about how under the Trump administration, we're abandoning our defense of democracy in Europe, specifically the war in Ukraine. And Congressman Bacon has brought considerable military experience to his role as congressman these last years, and hasn't been afraid to buck the party on issues like continued defense of Ukraine, at least in words, not always in deeds. But if elected and the vote to cut funding for Ukraine's defense effort comes up, how would you vote?
I think we need to continue funding the Ukraine for all the reasons that you just mentioned. I'm also worried, aside from defense spending, which we seem to be comfortable with our defense spending and increasing defense spending, I'm worried about the diplomacy piece of the equation. And I'm worried about how even some of these economic trade policies are hurting our relationships abroad at a time where I think the U.S. could use all the allies it can get. The world is a dicey place right now, not only the situation in Ukraine, looking at what's happening in Iran. I mean, there's a lot where I worry that this administration is pushing away a lot of allies and potential allies. And I think that's a danger that needs to be addressed really quickly.
Yeah. As we wrap up, Denise, I certainly want to talk about any other issues you want to talk about, but maybe one more question
Sure.
about finance and wealth. A study from the Rand Corporation found that in my lifetime, nearly $80 trillion in wealth has been redistributed from the bottom 90% of Americans to the top 1%. I believe, if I'm right, you were quoted after the Senate advanced the big, beautiful bill that you characterized it as a massive tax giveaway to billionaires. Does the federal government have a role in this redistribution of wealth? And if so, what is that role? And would you support raising the top marginal income or corporate income tax?
Yes, the federal government has a role to play in this. And I believe that government should be working to make people's lives easier, not standing in the way of things that people want to do, not standing in the way of people's personal decisions, but trying to make things easier for people. And what concerns me is that it appears like every decision that is coming from this administration is designed to help a very specific group of people.
Yep.
And that we are just ignoring everybody else. The bottom half is just getting hosed, not just being ignored, they're getting hosed. You know, we're taking away healthcare. They're looking at eroding our public schools. Anything from energy costs. I mean, it feels like it is almost a proactive effort to keep people down. And that is unconscionable. I don't know how we grow as a society. I don't know how we evolve as a society if we have government that is intent on holding people back and only allowing the very, very top to succeed. So I think that we need to ensure that there are policies in place that make it easier for folks to get by. And I'm not talking about handouts. I don't think people in Nebraska are looking for handouts. I think they're looking for a fair shake. I think they're looking for their government not to have their thumb on the scale and keep them down. And, even in the original version of the Big Beautiful Bill, there was a tax increase on the top 1%, and that Congress took that out. We need to get back to fighting for the people that put us in office in the first place. And if we don't have more elected officials who are just normal people who, are working parents or working folks or are blue collar people or whatever, we're going to lose that because we're going to keep having these folks in office who live in an alternate universe from how most people live. And that's really, really problematic. And that's what's getting lost to me. And that is, I think, the most frustrating thing to sit back and watch is, again, that we have elected officials who seem to be very clear on how problematic some of this legislation is, and yet they don't do anything about it. And I don't know if it's fear, and I don't know if it's, they're scared to lose their cushy gig and, all the benefits that come with it, or if they're being threatened. I don't know what it is, but they're leaving people behind. And my parents are immigrants, and they came here believing in the American dream. And that is fundamental to who I am. They believe they came here with nothing and they built a really beautiful life and they gave their kids an amazing life. And look, now they've got a daughter running for Congress out in Nebraska. I don't think they could have ever imagined that when my mom was a little girl growing up in Cuba, and here I am. That should still exist. That's the beauty of this country. Yeah. I believe in that fundamentally. We've lost that. But I still think there's hope to get back there, but it's going to take being really intentional about who we elect, the kind of policies that we advance, and just not losing sight of the people who need our help. They have to be at the forefront, and they're not always the folks that write the big checks, but they're the folks that need the most help and that the government should be helping the most. That's why I'm running. Those are the people I want to speak for. Those are the people who need the help right now.
Yeah. Well, Denise Powell, thank you for running. Is there anything else that you wanted to dive into that I haven't covered? By the way, this isn't one and done. I'm going to welcome you back again in the months to come. So, but is there anything else that you'd like to close with today?
No, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to chat, to tell my story, and thank you for, we need more truth tellers in the world. So I appreciate you and all that you do. And thanks for shining the light on important issues. And it really means a lot. And it's really important in our world today. So thank you.
Thanks, Denise. Okay. Well, we'll check in with you again soon. Best of luck.
Good. Thank you.
You're going to get a lot of steps in the next however many months to the election.
The best. So. Bring it on.
Denise Powell, thanks so much.
Thanks, Dan.
Hey, thanks, Denise, for joining me today, and best of luck with your run for Congress. Thanks to Chase Porter for your excellent work in producing this episode, and Ike Samanas for your graphic design work. And thanks to each of you for tuning in. Now, go do good things. I'm Dan Parsons.